All right, welcome back. Today I got the old mic on a steak knife trick, right? Only the most professional setups here. Just popped in a Zen. Don't do these. Jesus, if you learn anything today, stay away from nicotine. Nicotine is the most useless, crappy drug you could possibly ever do. So don't do it. But I want to talk a little bit about um, psychedelics, MDMA, things that are helpful for uh, getting through trauma. I want to talk about the different types. So, one type, you have the traditional psychedelics. Well, actually, just regular psychedelics, right? You have things like mushrooms, shrooms, with the active ingredient is psilocybin. Then you have ayahuasca, right? I think a lot of us have heard about ayahuasca, so it was a big thing a minute ago. All these like startup folks are going to South America and doing ayahuasca and being like, "Whoa, I reached enlightenment" and stuff. Um, the active ingredient in that is dimethyltryptamine, DMT. Psilocybin and dimethyltryptamine, they're both tryptamines. That's our class of family. Then you have LSD. I don't remember something L lysergic acid. Wait, lysergic, whatever the hell it is, right? That's another psychedelic. This one's a little bit more dangerous. Now it's not really dangerous, but it can be for the wrong person. If you have now any of these psychedelics, even mushrooms, which is by far the safest one, but any of these psychedelics, if you have a family history of schizophrenia or things like that, like they can be a little risky because they could trigger that potentially. It's a risk. Mushrooms is very tame. LSD is a little more so, right? There's a little more of a risk for that. Then you have things like 2CB, which is 2CB. The effects of 2CB can be described as a combination of LSD and MDMA. Now, and then there's DMT itself, which is the active ingredient in ayahuasca, but you can actually get that in crystalline form, and the journey on that lasts about 10 to 15 minutes tops, and it's extremely intense. It's probably the least healing one there, but you can get some crazy experiences. It's not just a roller coaster kind of, drug substance. It's not just that. You can get valuable stuff from DMT, but since it's shorter, it's a little harder. So then your other medicine for uh, healing trauma is MDMA. And I think I already maybe talked about this in a previous video, but MDMA is incredibly powerful. It was, I don't know if it still is, but it was in the process of becoming FDA approved as a treatment for PTSD. Right? They did they did these clinical trials on a bunch of soldiers and stuff, with great results. And MDMA is an empathogen, and it works on the dopamine and serotonin systems, whereas the psychedelics generally work on serotonin. Now, MDMA, it's an interesting one. It's one to be careful with. You don't want to overdose yourself, like 200 milligrams and below. Generally, it's like 120 milligrams. Um, and you can do a booster dose, but that's not, well, it's there's different schools of thought. I mean, some people think doing a booster dose is totally fine, and maybe it is. But the way I learned it is to not do a booster dose, and that's worked well for me. So, you know, different schools of thought. But what MDMA does is similar to psychedelics, but it works in a different way. It makes it so your inner parts can integrate. That trauma can integrate on its own. The cool thing is, with MDMA, you don't actually have to. Uh, well, I guess when none of them you really have a guided trip necessarily, but With MDMA, it's self-guided. You take the medicine. You have people there to hold space and keep you. You know, if you need anything, they're there. But overall, the medicine guides your journey, and really, it's not the medicine; it's your brain, right? Because what happens when you get the MDMA in your system is it starts to take down the walls, and the shit inside that has been wanting to come up and that's been bothering you and that's been causing problems in your life, that's stuffed underneath the surface, right? Though that surface crust, right? It just goes away for a little bit, and all that stuff comes up. Now you may be thinking that sounds terrifying, and I don't want any part to do with that. And you're partly right, partly wrong. Partly right in that, yeah, scary stuff that you don't want to think about, things you don't want to admit to yourself, they come up. But where you're wrong is it's not that terrifying, because what MDMA also does is it makes it not scary. So even though you can feel the fear and you'll actually display it on your face, sometimes well, depending on what happened with you, right? But like for me, I'll scream sometimes because these are screams that have needed to come out for a long time and they never got a chance to. And even though you're experiencing that, you actually feel safe enough to experience it without resisting it. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that right, but it doesn't, even though it's scaring your body and your brain and just your whole system is processing the fear and integrating it, you don't actually feel it that much. So you don't get that automatic response to just shove that shit right back down. And that's the magic of it, is because that stuff can come up now safely and integrate on its own, and the results are incredible. You start out, my very first MDMA session, this was maybe 5 years ago. It was for the purpose of you know PTSD recovery. It wasn't for fun. It was in a therapeutic setting, right? And that's not to bash MDMA for fun. Cool. But if you're someone like me and you got shit down there, you don't want to waste you don't want to waste your tolerance window on parties. And that's the other thing. You get a tolerance window. You get about 3 good MDMA trips before the magic starts to wear off, is what I've been told. I'm on journey number 3, so I haven't done a number 4. I don't know. Could be true, could be not. It for me, I have no idea. But that's what I've been told, and that's what I've done. Now, the beautiful thing is, after like my first MDMA journey, I started out with just a lot of anxiety, right? Just this feeling of not being safe, anxiety, just this like underlying fear, you know? And it's so constant that you don't really notice it after a while, right? Like, lived with it my whole life, so I'm like, I don't know, but you do get that tension, and that stuff really sucks. It's fucking shitty. Um, and after doing the journey, it felt like my whole entire world shifted, and it felt like all of a sudden the world became safer. Now, did the world become safer? No. But what happened? My inner world became safer, right? All these parts that were scared as hell, that were on the outside of my psyche. If you're familiar with shadow work at all, that's the it's a system that's used, right? There's pieces of you that are broken off and that are on the outside of your psyche, and then integration is when you integrate them back in, so you get that safety. You're not pushing parts of yourself outside of your consciousness. So after the MDMA session, yeah, I felt like, I was like, oh my God, like the world's a safer place now. That's exactly what it felt like. It felt like my reality had been like shifted, like the dimension changed, you know? And it was really incredible, really incredible. I had done a ton of psychedelics beforehand for the same purpose, right? For the same purpose of like, hey, my brain's screwed, so I need to fix that, you know. And with those, usually the results would last 2 weeks, right? But then it would come back. But with the MDMA, it was permanent, and it stayed permanent, never changed, never went back to the shitty baseline. And today, um, my wonderful close friend facilitated an MDMA session for me. So uh, yeah, that was this morning. That was, a while ago now. But processed through most more stuff, and it was scary. The stuff that I was scared beforehand because I'm like, I know some shit's gonna come up. That's the whole point, though. You want stuff to come up. That's the whole entire purpose of it all. Because if stuff doesn't come up, then you're not really healing from anything, right? So you want the scary stuff to come up, and it did, and it was scary, but not too scary because again, the MDMA itself makes it safe. And yeah, and afterwards, I gotta say, it's an interesting one. I don't feel like the shift isn't as dramatic and like boom like it was the first time I did it, right? But I think there is a shift. I don't know. I'm still a bit. I'm not. There's no effects left, but I am a bit tired. I'm a bit loopy just from you just expend energy, you know. So, um, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. Really, really cool. I feel really, really fortunate, and I think this is a huge, huge step. So, another thing I noticed is, I've always cared a whole lot about, about trying to make money online and stuff. That's been my dream and all this stuff, and so I've really expended a whole vast amount of energy trying to do that. And as I've given up kind of that hope. I mean, the hope is still there somewhere, but I've kind of just let it go. It's a lot easier to do stuff. I'm recording this video. Why? Because I don't really. I don't know. I don't really. I don't care too much. It's so. Maybe I should make a whole nother video on this actually. But giving up is actually helpful. Isn't that weird? Another one of those weird life paradoxes. Another one of those weird ones. But anyways, just want to give you a little update on that, and yeah, see you later.